We have started.
Thank you, Veronica. Good morning, everybody in the UK, and good afternoon to all our colleagues and listeners in ASEAN. My name is Paul North from the UK-ASEAN Business Council, and I would like to welcome you all to our UK-ABC Digital Export Series, TVET Opportunities in ASEAN. Technical and vocational education and training is recognised as an important element in educational strategies to close skill gaps. In practice, though, it is a challenge for school-based TVET systems to deliver and supply workplace-ready resources that meet the demands of business and industry. Today, we will hear about those challenges and opportunities from our guest speakers. We have Jonathan Ledger, who is a TVET specialist within the education team at Department for International Trade in London. Kelly Ortiz, who is a senior trade and investment manager at DIT based in the Philippines, responsible for the region. And we also have Anya Yorichina, who's a director, international stakeholder engagement at Pearson. Before we start our presentations, just to let you know that all attendees are in mute mode, and you can send in at any time questions for our presenters through the question box in the lower section of the webinar dashboard. We will endeavour to answer these during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. The webinar will be recorded and will be available on our media channel shortly after. Just to start by saying that we, UK-ASEAN Business Council, help companies of all sizes build new contacts, provide market insights, and raise the awareness of the vast commercial opportunities in what is the fastest growing region in the world.
All right, we're experiencing some connection issues. We will be back shortly. Just allow us a couple of minutes until Paul gets back online. Just a moment. All right, Paul, we can see you back online. Please do unmute yourself. Perfect.
Thanks, Veronica. My apologies. I seem to have had a power cut here, so I'm on one battery power at the moment, so hopefully I can still remain with you. I do apologise. If you could just remind me where I got to before you lost me.
You were just on the question box, Paul, so asking the audience to type their questions on the question box to allow interaction with the presenters.
Lovely. Okay. So once again, please do type your questions into the question box in the lower right-hand corner of the dashboard. And just start by saying that at UK-ABC, we help companies of all sizes build new contacts, provide market insights, and raise awareness of the vast commercial opportunities that are available in this fastest growing region in the world. We also bring ASEAN to the UK through a sustained calendar of events. So watch this space, and I do encourage you all to visit our website, ukabc.org.uk, along with our forthcoming events program. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce Jonathan Ledger. So over to you, Jonathan, for your presentation.
Paul, thank you so much indeed for that introduction. I'm always a bit embarrassed, when you introduce me as a specialist, because I think sometimes, particularly in circumstances that we're all trying to work in at the moment, I don't feel very specialist sometimes. But anyway, good morning to everybody. And I just really want to talk through quickly a little bit about what DIT is doing to support suppliers entering ASEAN markets. And then later on this morning, you will hear from my colleague from the Philippines, Kelly, and she will talk you through some of what is actually happening in each of the countries related to technical and vocational education. And as you may be aware, the UK government has an ambition to enable systemic reform of education systems. And that means at the government level, at the institute level and the individual level, providing support and expertise to build capacity and capability. And you, the suppliers that are listening to this webinar today, clearly are either operating in parts of ASEAN or are looking to enter ASEAN and do more with your businesses. And so we want to try and encourage that and support you in that process. And we do that through a range of activities that what we want to try and achieve is supporting economic development and growth and sustainability of an appropriately skilled workforce in key industrial areas. And clearly, each of the countries, which Kelly will talk about, will have different priorities, and we flex it and we change according to those needs. So that's really important. And I guess people always say to me, well, what do you do to make that happen? In our London office, as well as me, who is a specialist in technical and vocational education, we have 2 civil servants who are geographically focused, and they support us in London and really understand the network of Her Majesty's government in all its forms throughout the region and the government-to-government relations. And then in country, we have a differing number, depends on the country, of staff who focus on TVET and education in general, and they really do understand their local markets. They deal with the local government and partners and suppliers and individuals in country. So we, wherever possible, we'll kind of make use of all of that HMG expertise that exists out there. As part of that activity, there are a number of ways in which we support companies looking to enter the market. So whether that's access to our global network of staff, it could be that you look on our DIT opportunities website, where there are opportunities posted from around the globe, in particular ASEAN. So I would suggest to you, if you do nothing else today, Google DIT opportunities and a website will come up, and you can search by keyword and see what opportunities are currently around. There's also an events page. So again, if you just Google DIT events, you will see a whole raft of events, and they are webinars, they are missions and all of that. And of course, at the moment with the COVID situation and the international travel, missions are not taking place actually in person. We're changing those to be virtual and online. So watch out for those. And on the government website as well, there's a whole load of market insight information. Now, I'm happy to supply a slide to Paul and the team with a list of links that will access all of this information, but it is worth taking a look at that. I just really quickly wanted to have a look at a couple of case studies of activity that is happening in the region. But first, let's take a look at the Asian Development Bank. So the Asian Development Bank funds a lot of education activity in country, and the scope of their activity is well within the range of technical and vocational education that we all deal with. So they're really looking for a Sustainable Development Goal 4 achievement. So when you're thinking about accessing the market, you really ought to be thinking about helping them achieve that at the government level, because that's their big target at the moment. And you want to be thinking about, ways to create inclusive education and inclusive development. Sometimes you'll need to think about, PPP, public-private partnerships, to enable the business to happen and the partnership to grow. Of course, nowadays, thinking about, how can you do this online? How can we assess skills online? How can we teach vocational skills online? And actually, surprisingly, there isn't much real true technical and vocational training online. So there's a lot of knowledge training and associated activity, but actually finding real true TVET style online training is a real kind of hard to find area. So if you're in that space and you're thinking about what can you do to enter the market, I would suggest a collaboration with a training partner that has the curriculum and a technology partner that can deploy might be something really worth considering, because all the countries are crying out for ways to deliver online and remotely to reach their people. And of course that will be the same after COVID as well, because in ASEAN there are a lot of communities that are not in the cities, and so you will need to kind of cater for them anyway. The other bit that they're really looking at are of course technical and vocational skills relating to Industry 4 and key enabling technologies and ICT and all of that gambit. So be focused on that. And even if you're from a traditional sector like construction or rail, for example, just as two, you might consider how those technologies will play into the future skills requirement of ASEAN. Because of course, ASEAN, by 2038 will have the largest youth population on the planet. It will become the new West in that sense. And so, that really is where the big focus is going to be. So in terms of the type of things that they're looking for, it literally is everything from technical and vocational policy and regulatory frameworks, quality assurance, accredited learning, accreditation, certification, but it's all about jobs. How do they get people with the right skills in the right job, for lifelong learning? And that's really where they're focused. So whatever you do, you've kind of got to fit into that. So there've been quite a few examples of where we have supported companies that are operating. So we have a company currently that was introduced through an open tender process. We helped a famous global brand that's operating in Brunei, and they wanted to develop some training for their workforce. So we helped them develop a specification. We posted it on our DIT Opportunities website. A few UK companies registered their interest, and then they went through a vetting process and decided to pick one or two, and then we end up with a contract that's worth £500,000 over the long term to be able to support Brunei and that particular company in setting up training provision and the whole process that would follow from that. So that's one example. In the Philippines, actually, there was a recent example of where two partners, one in the UK and one in Philippines, were just introduced to each other because they are both in the tourism and hospitality sector, and they're now working up a partnership, and they get support from our local team in Philippines. But they're really looking for a long-term course and certification relationship. And the particular company in Philippines, is a vocational college, but it also serves students for those working on cruise ships, and is seen as a hub for the region. So whoever gets trained in the Philippines usually ends up working in any of the other ASEAN countries and wider. So, you know, these are all kind of the typical examples. And a lot of what we do as well will come from government to government relations. So we work closely with ministers of education, CMEO, TVET, all of these organisations, really to make sure that we drive change and we drive UK participation at the government level, at the top level, as well as working at the bottom level. And what we hope to achieve is kind of a pincer movement where policy meets actual implementation and expertise of that. So there we are. Look, the range of things that DIT can do really is, you know, very vast. It can be from simple overseas introductions to education partners or developers or investors. It could be that, you know, you need to overcome hurdles in actually trading with a particular country. There might be some kind of regulatory change that's required or something, and we can talk to the countries about those particular issues. It might be that you need something diplomatic in terms of support. Might be that you want our in-country trade people to help you with some activities. It could be that you need, you know, to understand the latest policy changes or anything like that. So there's a whole range of stuff. So please do come and talk to either myself, our team in London, we can connect you with them, or of course Kelly and her team that operate throughout the region. There we are, just a flying introduction. I'd like to now hand over, if I can, I think it's Kelly that's coming up next. So handing over to Kelly. Thank you.
Hi, Paul, you are muted. Can you please unmute yourself, Paul?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan, for that presentation, particularly with no slides as well. And it's quite good to hear that there are some opportunities there in the region for online training. But thank you very much for that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kelly, who's based in the Philippines for the region, and I'll hand over the slides to you. Please go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Jonathan. So good morning, everyone in the UK, and good afternoon if anyone's here in Asia. My name is Kelly Ortiz, and I'm based in the Philippines. Thank you so much for UK-ABC for inviting me to share about the snapshot of the region. And it's a privilege to speak before our friends in UK TVET for this. So moving forward, I wish to update you about the situation for COVID response here in ASEAN. And we believe that here in ASEAN, we managed it relatively better than the rest of the world. We were prepared, so the government took immediate measures to implement lockdown procedures, close off airports, limit movement of the public, and also prevent mass gatherings. So that has effectively flattened the curve, and our fatalities and incidents of infection are quite low, as you would have read. And because of these measures, we foresee that Asian countries will be able to reopen quite soon. Sorry, I lost my screen. There you go. And the pre-COVID economic projection was at 4% all throughout the region. It ranges from 1 to 7% in different countries. But however, post-COVID, the ADB has assessed that there will be a 1% average growth in the region, ranging from 0 to 4.8%. 4.8% will be in Vietnam. And just as a common theme across all ASEAN countries, it is a young and rapidly growing population. In terms of skilled work, it's still a lot of low skills. There are weak quality assurance frameworks, it's fragmented, and there are poor facilities. Because of COVID, there will be an immediate unemployment all throughout. And governments believe that delivering quality TVET will solve the unemployment issue. And in order to do this successfully in this post-COVID environment, governments are looking at alternative and online training delivery platforms, particularly mobile solutions, mobile phone solutions, not laptops and desktops. The key organizations to also look out for in ASEAN will be the Asian Development Bank. As Jonathan mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities there in education, because they support TVET across developing Southeast Asian countries and the Greater Asia in general. There is also the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is like the EU. It's a loose form of EU here in ASEAN, and they are undergoing an initiative on the mutual recognition of skills and the ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework. So the ASEAN TVET group meets annually to discuss how the TVET sector can improve its image, the quality of TVET, and outcomes to ensure mobility of workers in the region, and to prepare itself to become competitive in the next generation, especially with IR 4.0. Now, I believe they're talking about moving some factories from China to ASEAN, so they're also preparing for that.
Excuse me, Kelly, just one moment. It appears that we cannot see your screen.
Oh, you couldn't? Sorry, let me.
I can see it here.
We
I
can see it,
screen.
Kelly. Don't worry. We can
Okay.
see it.
Okay,
Excellent.
sorry, Paul. Sorry, Paul. So, so we will inform all of you if we are going to host a virtual trade mission to introduce you to the local market. And now moving on to the countries. So just as a caveat, the 5 skills priorities listed in all of these slides, they are a mix of pre-COVID and post-COVID. There is still no government clarity on what skills will be focused as part of the government agenda post-COVID. So just bear that in mind. Going to Brunei, so Brunei has a smaller population compared to the other ASEAN countries, but it's very wealthy because of the oil. So Brunei foresees its growth in the energy sector, the maritime sector, ICT, it remains to be priority, and the construction sector. Advantage of Brunei is it's an English-speaking system. So they're highly educated. It adopts the UK standard. Because it's very rich as well, that could be a downside for TVET, because the government fully funds students to study even in the UK, and the king pays for it. Moving to Indonesia, so Indonesia is the 4th largest population in the world. They have 273 million people, and 42% of that is under the age of 25. TVET remains a key priority in Indonesia, although the sector at the moment is still very domestic and localized. So they still don't have a lot of foreign players in Indonesia. They are looking to become competitive in the sectors of agro-fishery, energy, tourism, maritime, service industry, manufacturing, and the digital and creative industries. So like all countries, most countries in ASEAN, there is a lack of coherent government policy with the stakeholders, and also planning is an issue, so they can't tackle it very successfully. Training institutions also lack the appropriate infrastructure, but again, these weaknesses are opportunities for UK providers. In Laos, we've got a country which has a 6 to 7 GDP growth in the past 10 years pre-COVID, and with focus on mining and energy. But because there's lack of talent on the ground, they have to import workers from Vietnam, Philippines, and China. And Laos attempts to do that as part of its strategy. However, the government funding is quite low, so TVET training in Laos is largely dependent on international donors such as GIZ, ADB, and the Swiss Development Agency. Key priority sectors are in agriculture, tourism and hospitality, business and foreign languages, mechanical and machinery repair, and construction. So Malaysia is quite an advanced economy compared to other ASEAN countries, and it envisions that all workers will be skilled by 2030. Unlike a lot of other ASEAN countries where the workers are low skilled, Malaysia is now focusing on higher level skills, such as in advanced manufacturing, agriculture, mining, quarrying, construction, and rail. This is because Malaysia no longer has a decreasing appetite in hiring expats from overseas, and they want homegrown talent to be able to fill those seats, those positions of management in these industries. But again, there are still some weaknesses, like, for example, the recent change in government kind of muddled up the government policy and strategy for TVET. And also there are 7 government agencies overseeing TVET. So they've established recently the JKKP TVET. It's like an organization designed to coordinate among the 7, just so they can have a coherent strategy moving forward. In the Philippines, so the government strategy is for the Philippines to attain global competitiveness, because the country is full of migrant workers, and then at the same time they want to use TVET to have access for jobs for the poorest of the poor. Because of COVID, from the 6.8% growth projection, the Philippines is down to 0.2% for the next 2 years. Unemployment is looming because of the migrant worker background. Because of the build under President Duterte, a lot of the focus will be on construction and upskilling of workers. Many construction companies in the Philippines are having difficulty to find workers who are able to do this. Also healthcare, Filipinos are famous for that. IT skills, there's a push for government to move and encourage people to enter into e-commerce and work from home businesses. And agriculture. Another niche opportunity is Islamic TVET. So there's the Bangsamoro region in southern Philippines, where they want to incorporate Islamic values into the TVET teaching. So that's they have their separate funding, so that's also a going concern. TESDA, the regulator, just recently launched an online learning platform to the public. You can download it on your iOS and your Android phones. Vietnam, certainly last but not the least, because it's the fastest growing economy in the ASEAN region, looking at 7% growth pre-COVID, and then now still going strong at 4.8%. And it has an aspiration to be an industrialized country by the end of 2020, and TVET is central to this aspiration. While the sector has not yet been internationalized, the government is quite open to work with foreign governments to improve their TVET. Focus is everything. If you see, they just threw everything in: automotive, engineering, IT, tourism, travel, business management, arts, supply chain, etc. Again, they're preparing to take over the factories which are moving in the country. Population is 97.3 million. As of now, the Vietnamese peoples have low-level skills. That's why the government is spending a lot of money to upgrade those skills so they are ready to meet the demands of the future. And next would be for the Asian Development Bank. Just a background. So the ADB is a development bank that lends money to developing countries in Asia to fund projects to fight poverty in the region. So this is not just in Southeast Asia, but in Greater Asia in general. And recently, they just launched a $20 billion fund allocated to help member countries counter the severe macroeconomic and health impacts caused by COVID-19. This means, though, that those loans and grants that ADB is giving out, a significant portion of it will be focused on TVET training for healthcare, as well as to combat unemployment. If you wish to know more, please get in touch with me. The Philippines, the ADB is located in the Philippines, so we are leading the relationship with ADB, and we can walk you further for other opportunities there. We are also organizing a business opportunities webinar in June to help you win contracts for ADB funded projects. And these are the contact details of the specialists in the region. Please feel free to get in touch with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for that very informative presentation, and particularly the opportunities that are available there for UK organisations. I mean, you did mention that there are challenges, but I think we should turn that around and make that an opportunity for UK companies to really get involved to support that. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Anya Yorichina, who is Director of Pearson, for her presentation. So over to you, Anya.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, everyone. And I'd like to thank UK-ASEAN Business Council for this fantastic opportunity and have a chance to speak with you and share our experiences and reflections. And hopefully also see how we can all work together in ASEAN markets. And I also would like to pay a particular thanks to the Department for International Trade and our great partners both in London and in the region, who actually helped us a lot with what both Jonathan and Kelly alluded to, from getting the right intelligence, establishing the government-to-government relations, as well as making sure that the opportunities that you are looking for are being followed up and cared in the region. I think I can start by reassuring everyone who is on the call that DIT are helping everyone, small, big provider, and with any opportunity that you may wish to pursue. So thanks a lot. And today I wanted to summarize a little bit of what Jonathan and Kelly were already saying about the increased demand for the high quality career-focused education in ASEAN. What are the key themes that are emerging post-COVID, in particular in terms of the industry sectors, and what is it there for education and TVET, and then how we can hopefully all work together with you. So just a little bit of theme setting, and I'm not going to repeat everything that's been already said, but I think we can see it around the world that closing the skills gap to promote economic prosperity is the theme around the world and very prominent in ASEAN. And the concept of lifelong learning, I think, has been embraced with variable still kind of success in terms of 100% success in the education sector. But the lifelong learning concept has been embraced by ASEAN governments, providers and employers. And as Jonathan said, the ASEAN workforce is the third largest labor, force in the world. It's around 350 million, and bearing in mind that 60% of the population in ASEAN are below the age of 30. It's kind of presenting right now both the challenge and the opportunity for the workforce as well as for the providers who are trying to work and help ASEAN countries come out of COVID. So what is this new norm, which we are going to see? Sorry, I think I'm experiencing some problems with my screen. Yeah, here we go. So just a little bit on the challenging landscape in ASEAN, not all over the world. I mean, yes, Kelly did talk about the economic growth, which may be down, and there are variable figures as to what it will be. But if we look at the sectors overall, and I'll come to it a little bit later, obviously, a large population of ASEAN is employed or engaged on kind of SMEs level in the services industry, and around 44% of all ASEAN workforce are employed in the services sector, and that's excluding even public services. So it's a huge challenge moving forward on how these people are coming back to work, and do they come back to the same work, or do they need to be retrained and reskilled? And if we go further and know already that the travel and tourism is one of the biggest affected areas, it's contributing around 12.6% into ASEAN economy in countries in particular like Cambodia, Philippines and Thailand. They're going to be most vulnerable. So we need to think about how we help the countries and the workforce in those markets and in those countries come out even stronger and have an opportunity to quickly reskill and retrain. And of course, the digitization and the digital ways of working. Again, everyone in ASEAN has got a smartphone, but does it translate immediately into the digital ways of working, the new skills, and probably new agility is required and even need more than ever. So again, the solutions around how to work digitally are becoming much, much more important. And of course, leading into this is the increased demand, exactly as Kelly said, to the consumer-driven education. You know, what kind of online and digital solutions people can access at their phones at their own time. So accessibility, agility, and relevance. All of this will be, you know, more than important. And I think there are opportunities absolutely for everyone, for small and for big providers from the UK. So just very quickly what Pearson is doing. I mean, obviously we are present in all the ASEAN markets and all over the world in more than 70 countries. And we wanted to make sure that when pandemic did hit, we can, you know, give employers, customers and partners around the world the opportunity to access a lot of our resources online. So we've committed quite a significant resource worth more than £25 million to be available, and continuing to look at the ways to work, not only with existing and potential customers, but with our partners, the co-creators, the co-designers, to provide the digital platform and the opportunities of co-creation and going together to the market. So again, this is already something preparing to strive post-COVID, and what you can do as providers, what you can try and think about in terms of your solutions, and also where we can also consider working together as, you know, relying on Pearson as an enabler in some of those markets. We achieved some major breakthrough in transformational reforms in TVET, like Thailand, for example, when we work very closely with the Department for International Trade, or again, the industries in Malaysia with energy sector. So look at the industry sectors. Yes, as Kelly said, it is still yet to identify which sectors in each particular country, but the theme around being construction and retail being affected, but then bouncing back even stronger based on the culture in ASEAN and the commitment to infrastructure. The healthcare, absolutely, and in healthcare, let's look at the care aspect as well as health aspects. So everything from social care and adult care, right through the hospital management and management of medical settings. Logistics and supply chains, and the move, as been said, from China to the ASEAN is a kind of biggest supply chain in manufacturing. And of course, our training and education services, and what are they and how consumer driven are they? And then, as we said, the digital and blended, it will be a new normal. So all the solutions that we are going to provide and promote to the ASEAN partners now will become a new norm. So everything we can do here will be accepted and will be embraced. So let's make sure that it's a sustainable solution which the countries can take longer term. It's not just filling the gap right now. It's what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And supporting the development of new skills. It's digital, it's hygiene, it's sustainability and business resilience. So the soft skills solutions working hand in hand with the technical ones. We are doing quite a bit and launched our learning hub, and we try to merge together the solutions for the TVET and skills. And these are some of the areas which we are trying to cover, from workplace behaviors, which would be relevant for everyone, from SMEs to big employers, to those currently unemployed, healthcare, teacher professional development, how teachers are adapting to the new norm, and of course the management side. You manage and create the teams and cross teams differently right now. You manage your projects differently right now. So what's going to happen here? And we're hoping to launch our flagship qualification BTEC fully online quite soon as well. But what I also would like to say here, and this is the platform which we would like to, you know, collaborate with any of you who are interested in thinking about co-creating the design and designing the new programs, or putting it on a platform which is accessible, by the way, through mobile phones, not only just through the laptops, to everyone. If there is something that you would like to explore, we're very happy to co-partner, co-design, co-badge, and work together with you in the region and with the provider. So please rely on us as the capability as well. And finally, it's the moving forward, and it's what we like as a symbol of moving forward is a tree, and tree of opportunities, tree of partnerships, and tree as an ecosystem. And at the heart of this is partnerships, partnerships in innovation, partnerships in digital, partnerships in talent. And you know, despite the fact that we are bigger, we are all in this together in working with our ASEAN partners, friends, and colleagues. So let's try and work together on making sure that ASEAN is a very, very strong region and a strong partner to the UK. And thank you very much. And on this line, I'll hand over back to Paul.
Thank you very much, Anya, for that very informative presentation there, and particularly the aspects of COVID and how we see that coming out. Just a couple of things. Please do continue to send in your questions through the question box in the lower part of the dashboard on your screen. We do have quite a few questions. One of them is, will the slides be available after the presentation? And yes, the slide decks will be available, and the recording of this webinar will also be available on our social media channel. So I do have some questions. One of them, I think, was what you mentioned, Jonathan, which was about the Asia Development Bank funding. And I've got a question here which was saying, do you feel is typical time frame for success in applying for ADB contracts?
That's a really good question, Paul, and thank you for whoever posted it. Generally, it's around 6 months. However, there's some work that people need to do in advance. So you have to go onto the ADB website and you have to register either individual as consultants or as companies. And then there's quite a long process of actually filling out a profile and identifying what are your real specialist areas. And the thing is, with working in ASEAN, because they do like the UK and they do want the very best from the UK, don't go on there and put all your mediocre delivery stuff, and don't think everyone has got everything that is perfect and brilliant. You know, you've got to pick the very best of what you deliver, and that is the bit you should try and promote in country. And I think, you know, we see quite a lot of mediocre and they spot it really quickly, and that puts them off. So go onto the ADB website, get your organisation registered, pay attention to that registration. Don't just do it once. It takes, you know, 3 or 4 weeks to get it right, and you have to keep revisiting it to make sure it's bang up to date. And then once you're registered, you're able to apply for expression of interests, opportunities, and tendering that is available on the ASEAN on the Asian Development Bank website. Don't expect to get a hit first time, even if you do bid. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3 rounds of bidding before you kind of appear on the radar properly within ADB. So, you know, don't be put off by, you know, not winning. People that win are the ones that keep going at it and have the tenacity to keep going. So please, you know, but allow yourself, I would say, at least 6 months. I've known contracts take 2 years by the time the initial spec goes out all the way through to actually implementation. So, you know, you've got to be in it for the long haul and pay attention to the ADB registration. You can't just bid if you are not actually on their system. And Paul, just as a point of interest, globally, the aid market, so, you know, Asian Development Bank, whether it's Caribbean Development Bank or whatever, the market is massive and in the billions for education. So currently there are around £2 to £3 billion worth of education opportunities. That covers the whole spectrum of education. And it might be interesting to know that in terms of UK companies, less than 3% of UK companies win business with ADB. And it's not because the ADB don't want to give them business, because the ADB want the UK involved. It's because people in the UK are not registered with ADB, and if you're not registered, you can't win it. It's a very simple equation. So my advice to everybody, get registered. Thank you.
Yes. No, that's fine, Jonathan. It's worth also mentioning that this is not just for the big boys as well. It is for the smaller organisations and consultants. And there is also an opportunity, obviously, if one of the big boys does win the contract, that also the smaller consultants can play a significant part on that. So it is open to everybody.
Absolutely, it is.
So we've got some more questions coming in, and I think I'll probably put this one over to Kelly and also get a comment from Anya. It's a couple of questions, and I think you did initially drop onto these, but it is about qualified personnel in the region, and I think it was Kelly who mentioned that there are challenges in getting hold of trained personnel. So the questions, a couple of questions here is, how is the demand of qualified TVET personnel going to develop in the next 3 to 5 years? How do you see that? And also, are there any structured pre-service programs for the training and development of TVET teachers? Do you want to push on that one first, Kelly?
Sure, and I need a little bit of help from Jonathan as well, who has worked directly with governments in the region, if you don't mind, Jonathan. So, but
No,
it's very different across different countries. Like, for example, in the Philippines, if we're talking about qualified personnel to deliver TVET training, in other countries, even teaching is nationalized, but now slowly governments are loosening up on that requirement. Because and in terms of upskilling the home talent for highly technical skills, governments have a plan, and they are working with the ASEAN region, and they meet regularly, like annually, to share experiences so that everybody is aligned in that in that respect. So I'm opening it up to Jonathan and Anya if you have anything to add for that. Thanks.
let Anya go first, because I've spoken, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Jonathan. So a couple of reflections. I think when it comes to the demand for qualified personnel, I think what we can see in ASEAN that despite the fact the teacher profession is quite conservative, the growing demand from the government on upskill and retrain teachers in modern TVET is only growing. And I think we can see it in all ASEAN countries, despite their differences, which is great. And the other big move as well, that there is a kind of a regional ASEAN understanding from all the governments that the teachers need to be upskilled and retrained in something completely new for the TVET, and the governments are working together on this. And the second point, in terms of the prep for teachers, and one of the examples is Thailand, when we actually are and have been working together with the DIT to implement the TVET reform with BTEC qualification at its cornerstone. But the advantage for all those of you going to Thailand is that part of this is actually retraining the teachers in all parts of Thailand, public and private institutions, colleges and universities, and that's what the government in Thailand wanted to do. And we have already provided around 40 to 50 training sessions to teachers. So the advantage for all of you is also that when you go there, you will see that there is already an ongoing training program. And it's not only about BTEC, it's about the world-class UK-based kind of qualifications in TVET, which will be relevant across the globe. So I think you should have a confidence that when the solutions are being implemented at a national level, the teacher training is coming as an essential component as the capacity development, and it's a commitment from the UK. It's not a commitment from one company. So I think you all should have confidence in this, Jonathan.
Thank you both very much. They're really good points. It is, I mean, each country is obviously doing its own labour market and workforce surveys to really understand what it needs. But, you know, whatever the solution is, it's got to be, you know, scalable. It's the kind of usual things, really scalable. It's got to be able to cross industries as well as, you know, take on large numbers of students. But also you have got to build that capability and capacity, because, you know, they are after the UK expertise around methodology, and it's that bit. And I would always state to you, as I do with all of these kind of webinars, is we're not trying to promote the UK system in ASEAN, because it's not the UK system they're after. That only just about works in the UK most of the time. What they're after is the methodology. So our long-standing historical methodology of being able to develop apprenticeships and all sorts of training programs and to be successful at it and a global leader in that field is what they're after. And you might think to yourself that, oh yeah, but the Germans and the Australians, you know, they're all over ASEAN and all of that, except the UK has the longest documented heritage of TVET, has one of the best flexible systems in the world, and it is exactly what the ASEAN nations are constantly looking for. So the only reason they look for Germany and Australians and others is because there aren't enough UK players in ASEAN. Paul, you're still on mute.
One of the questions, just following on from that has come through is about standards and regulations, and how that quality and pre-service teacher training will be assured. Just what are the impacts of these standards on and have on practice teacher training and quality?
Okay, so just to pick up on part of that then. So across ASEAN, there is an ASEAN reference or qualifications reference framework, a bit like the EU framework for qualifications. So in each country, they have an agreement to develop their own vocational training system and the teacher training that goes with it. And then they've elevated that to the regional level, and they're doing that on a comparison to the EU eight levels and the UK 8 or England 8 levels, and how that maps into Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but also to Latin America. So, you know, they've developed their own system, but it is transversal in terms of if people move out of the region. And we know there are lots of people that, you know, will cross borders, and their biggest migration, don't forget, is actually not over the border, surprisingly. Their biggest migration of teachers and workforce is actually from rural economies to city economies. And so, you know, it's about that flexibility in that system, which is why they want that robust measurement and using a qualifications framework to be able to do that. So they are comparing, they have, you know, they have benchmarked against the best systems in the world, and they are striving to achieve that level. What they're struggling with is getting enough through on a continual basis to meet their demands.
Good, excellent. No, and I think moving on from that also, because there's a lot of questions here coming through about programs and trainings, and one which you might want to take up, Anya, because it was also part of your presentation, is there any program, training or mentorship for startup leaders regarding digitalization, cybersecurity, and the like?
Thank you, Paul. So I assume this is the program for the local for the ASEAN. Yes, is this correct, or the kind of the ASEAN workers? I think the answer to this is probably yes and no. So it's what Kelly was saying, that you know, there are some random examples of something existing, but I don't think that there is anything holistic pan-ASEAN. What we are trying to do is trying to bring together some of those, in particular on the management side, and helping the SMEs in particular to reskill and reshape their key competencies which they had, and probably even the cultural ones, you know, be natural salesmen, but how do you do e-commerce and put it on the new level? And e-commerce is back end, not just the front end of having your phone. It's the back end of the logistics and the security and everything else. But I think in general, the area for supporting SMEs and getting this boost on the moving startup from one area to another is great. We do have a platform where to put the content, but I think content development in niche areas is always a great area for all providers, and also working with smaller niche sub-areas or sub-regions in ASEAN, as opposed to even the national ones. Because I think what you also will find for these particular ones, that if you go to Indonesia, for the smaller provider, it's easier to work at the kind of sub-local and provincial level rather than at the national level. So I think every one of us has a role to play. Some would open the national efforts, but actually for some of our UK partners and friends, it's much easier to take a niche opportunity within a particular province or region and work together with them. And I think we would only encourage this by bringing our capability, but then it's going to be on to you to actually implement it for a particular supply. And I think that's what the Department for International Trade likes to see, that you have a big provider and enabler, and then you have smaller providers from the UK working also very closely with smaller partners so that we deliver everything on scale. I think that's the kind of the more sensible solution from us.
I'll just jump in.
Please do, Kelly.
So for example, if we're talking about highly technical skills like cybersecurity, data science, startups, that's in Asia, that's not TVET. You're not working with technical vocational companies. You have to work with universities. You just won't have the enrollees for TVET will just not have the mathematical capability or the advanced skills to be able to take it. So you're looking at a different delivery partner, but not TVET colleges.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Kelly. I'd just like to take one more question, which is more on the practical side, really, because it's coming from an organisation, a business here, who are having to make choices on where they start to or to move into their next markets. And the question is how are the TVET opportunities in ASEAN countries compared to other regions in the world? And you know, what would be the advantages of going into ASEAN rather than going into, say, Latin America, Middle East, or even Africa?
Do you know what? I love that question. And I love it because a lot of people are worried about getting on a plane and going 11 hours plus away, you know, and thinking, oh my God, you know, is it really worth it? Actually, in ASEAN, there's a couple of things. Most of the markets within ASEAN have money, and they're very happy to pay the right price for high quality expertise that really demonstrates and is able to deliver impact in the way that they want it. So that's the first thing that's really important. Second thing is that once you have secured that positive relationship, and it is, like in so many other parts of the world, we always say it's built on relationships, but in ASEAN, that is never more true than we say it. Once you have that relationship and you look after it, it is really hard to break it down. So when you secure a partner, you are securing a long life partner. The other part of the equation is that when they say they're going to do it, and I've had this experience myself, you can spend ages talking to them, and you know that suddenly they'll turn it on and they want everything yesterday, and you have got to be ready to kind of dance on that penny and move really quickly. And once they do that, they charge ahead and they are committed. If I compare that, because being a TVET specialist, I have to operate on a global basis. Actually, we don't quite have the same equation in all other parts of the world. So we see bits of that kind of, you know, real kind of pushy, we want to get stuff delivered to a high quality way. We might see that in bits of the Gulf. We might see that in parts of Central America. But actually, in the way that ASEAN commits to stuff and drives it forward, we don't see that kind of passion and tenacity in many other places. So, you know, I'm a great fan of the ASEAN market. If nothing else, the people are just brilliant.
I just wanted to add two quick points to what Jonathan said. I think it's about sustainable business model that you're going to be creating there, and it's crucially important. So it's not a one-off, you know, you are creating something really long-term and sustainable. And lastly, you will make great friends. I think you are on one page with every colleague and partner you work across ASEAN, and that's a great advantage to have. It's hugely encouraging.
Yes, lovely, Anya. Thank you very much for that comment. Well, look, guys, we've reached our 1 hour, unfortunately. We still do have some more questions, and just to let everybody know that we will get back to you on those questions. But just really to finish off, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for a very, very informative session on TVET, and to all our attendees today. I hope and trust that that has been useful to you. And finally, just to mention that our next webinar, our next event in the UK-ABC Digital Export Series is on opportunities in Southeast Asia's Healthcare. That's on the 28th of May. And we are joined again by the Department for International Trade. That'll be the Healthcare UK sector specialist, and also a company called Asia Care Group, who are a specialist healthcare consultancy firm in the region specializing in advisory services. So once again, thank you very much for all attending. Apologies for the slight technical details that we had at the beginning of the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.